Okay, we had some technical difficulties, but we are back now. So I'm going to set things back up again and begin, I guess, at the 5-minute marker in case people who watch this when it's not live want to just fast forward to that point. YouTube with, I made this nice, huge speech about beliefs and various things, and none of it got recorded because of the connection malfunction. So actually, but I don't know, should I blame YouTube? Should I blame my internet? Like, I don't really know who's to blame, but whatever. Okay, how do we look in sound? Whatever. Okay, how do we look? That's good. So yes, we are restarting. This has happened before. Every once in a while, there's some stream anomaly. Mercury is retrograde right now, keep in mind, so maybe we shouldn't be surprised. These kinds of things can happen at this time. So, I'll try to reiterate everything once we're 5 minutes in. We're talking about Chiron going direct in Pisces. I will talk more about that. Yeah, it's been a fun and interesting enough stream so far. I do wish I had succeeded in waking up earlier so that you most likely would have had more people here. And then that always makes it so much more interesting because there's more people like talking and sharing their views and opinions and questions. And that's always best, but I can't always control my sleep schedule. It just doesn't work like that. My body won't allow me to do that. So anyway, I'm going to tweet this out and be like, still live. Tweet. All right. So we'll begin in 2.5 minutes, or we will resume in 2.5 minutes. Yeah, it's an interesting thing looking at the astrology. Again, I want to reiterate that I am not all-knowing when it comes to astrology. I've studied it for years, but there are still things that I don't know about it, many things, in fact. And so that's why, as we're doing the stream, I'm giving my view, and then we're looking up additional information about the most important aspects because I want to be as thorough as possible here. I want to do the best job I can. So anyway, the tweet's looking good. Yeah, the website did turn out to be pretty relevant in what it was talking about that did not get recorded. Well, most of it didn't anyway. And then it talks about the movement of Chiron this year. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. All right, beginning or resuming in just over 1 minute. You know what? I think it's time for an Instagram story telling people that I'm live. That should be most advantageous. But I'm going to check some other things first. Okay, I guess I have to do this in less than 40 seconds. Oh boy, can I do it? Hey everyone, I am indeed live talking about the astrology of December 2018. There were technical difficulties, but I just restarted the stream. Go to Poetic Heretic, or go to youtube.com/poeticheretic90, also a link in my bio to join us if you want. Hey everyone, I am indeed live talking about the astrology of December 2018. There were technical difficulties, but I just restarted the stream. Go to Poetic Heretic, or go to youtube.com/Poetic Heretic 90. Also link in my bio to join us if you want. Hey everyone, I am indeed live. All right, that'll have to suffice for now because we need to resume, I see. So, letting it post the story now. And, all right, let's resume talking about Chiron going direct in Pisces. We did find this information from PandoraAstrology.com, and I'm going to read it to you now, and then we'll go over it further. How does Chiron change us? By healing us once and for all, and by restoring us to wholeness. During a Chiron transit, you may feel that you are having a wounding experience. Often it feels that a fresh wound is being laid in the present, that you are being broken open. But if you examine it more deeply, you will find that it reminds you of something painful from the past, and that the past is surged up to blend with the present. I think the point that I want to make in the previous stream, but was then cut off by the malfunction, is that I think what this is particularly talking about with like a Chiron transit, like if you are going to feel like you're having a wounding experience, what that is if you have anything in your chart that Chiron aligns with. So in this case, if you have anything in the last couple degrees of Pisces, especially if you have anything at 27, well, how should I say this? 27, 54, or anything like extremely close to that, then Chiron is going to hover right around that point in your chart as it slows down and then prepares to turn direct and does go direct. As it becomes stationary, it's going to like hover right around that point in your chart, and you're indeed going to feel it if you have anything at 27 of Pisces. Or well, again, 27, 54, almost 28 of Pisces, or even anything near there, you're going to feel it. If it's more like 28, 29 of Pisces, or like almost into Aries, then you won't feel it for a little while. But you know, that's basically what it's talking about. It's talking about like this event where Chiron aligns with something in your chart, and then you feel like you're having a wounding experience or whatever. So very interesting stuff indeed. But to resume, let us see here. You are experiencing both wounds at once, but that may not be apparent until you look at the situation more deeply. To become fully present again, you need healing, and Chiron has brought your awareness to that. Chiron's purpose is to restore wholeness. Chiron reconnects things that have been separated or broken apart in order that they may be mended and ultimately reintegrated with each other. When this happens in your psyche, some call it soul retrieval, but Chiron can also mend broken homes, Moon, broken reputations, Saturn, or broken relationships, Venus. To do this, Chiron must remind us of the earlier time when the thing got broken, so the healing can happen. The beauty of it is that if you allow it to happen instead of fighting it, you can come away more integrated, more whole in that area than you've ever been before. And so, I guess one thing that I am wanting to say here is that this whole idea is kind of a common idea in the spiritual community, this idea that like things will happen that are a reflection of some past trauma that then give you an opportunity to heal that trauma so that the unwanted thing does not happen again, so that something like that never happens again, basically speaking. But what I am also always wanting to emphasize, as many people know by now, is the importance of beliefs. And I'm saying that your beliefs form your reality. And so keep in mind, it's not just the trauma that happened, but it's also the negative beliefs that were born out of the trauma that happened that you must analyze. In fact, I would almost I would almost want to recommend looking at that first, looking at the beliefs first, and figuring out why you believe those negative beliefs and how you can change them to positive beliefs, recognizing that it's your beliefs that are actually forming your reality, and then looking into like healing the trauma and shadow work and stuff like that. But regardless, when it comes to this Chiron stuff, let us keep in mind that you can't leave beliefs out of the equation when beliefs are a huge part of the equation in determining what reality you actually form with your mind. So just wanting people to keep that in mind. Now, let us resume. Itchy nose. Okay. One of the most important Chiron transits is the Chiron return, which is when Chiron has traveled all the way around the zodiac and returns to where it was when you were born. This happens to everyone the year they turn 50, and might serve to explain why 50 tends to be such a painful age, fraught with regret. But for true healers, integrators, hole makers, and bridge builders, it is a coming of age. So if I have any people who are approaching 50 in my audience, don't know if I do or not, that can be something for you to keep in mind. I've still got a ways to go myself to that, fortunately, but probably not as long as you think. I'm probably significantly older than people think that I am. But whatever, that's another issue. Okay, movement of Chiron this year. Let me see what we have. In 2018, Chiron travels forward 2 degrees to 2 degrees of Aries, then turns retrograde and travels back to 27 degrees of Pisces, turns direct, and travels forward through 2 degrees of Aries again, finishing the span in early 2020. Then it moves into the next patch of degrees where it will do the same thing. This means that if you have any planet in 27 degrees of Pisces to 20 degrees of Aries, you're having a Chiron transit to that planet this year. And this is kind of like what I was talking about earlier, although they're expanding it to 20 degrees of Aries, I guess. Because Chiron in Pisces forms a challenging aspect to Virgo, Gemini, and Sagittarius, if you have any planet in 27 and 29 degrees of any of those signs, that planet is also having a Chiron transit. Yeah, see this, I thought of this earlier and I wasn't sure if I should mention it because I wanted to keep things simple, but yes, indeed. Like if you have planets or points from like 27 to 29 degrees of almost any sign other than, I guess, Aquarius or Aries, then Chiron is aspecting that in some way at this time. Like, I mean, let's just see here. If it was like at the tail end of Taurus or Capricorn, it would be a sextile. If it was at the tail end of Gemini or Sagittarius, it would be a square. If it was at the tail end of Cancer or Scorpio, it would be a trine. If it was at the tail end of Leo or Libra, it would be a quincunx. And if it was at the tail end of Virgo, it would be an opposition. And of course, there are other aspects like half squares and sesquisquares and all of these things, but I don't know. Guess we're not wanting to get too complicated here. Let's see. And because Chiron in Aries forms a challenging aspect to Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, if you have any planet in 0 to 2 degrees of any of those signs, that planet is having a Chiron transit as well. Very interesting. Oh yeah, I guess that's the thing I didn't mention. It could be the tail end of the signs I mentioned or the early degrees of the signs immediately after those ones. So, because it's at the end, Chiron's at the end of Pisces going into Aries, but whatever. Here, let's just see what else we can say about this, if possible. I wish it would talk more about what it means when Chiron goes direct, because I would like more information on that, but it doesn't look like it's going to. Well, I'm live right now, so I don't have time to go digging through a bunch of information, so I guess what I've said so far will have to suffice. Just like, as I mentioned earlier, like, basically, as I sort of put the pieces together, like the most basic idea when something goes direct, whether it's Chiron or whatever, is that when it goes direct, we begin feeling like we're making progress in that area. So for Chiron, it's the healing of wounds. But it isn't really until it gets out of its retrograde shadow, which means it gets to the point at which it went retrograde to begin with, when it gets to that point again and beyond that, that we really begin to feel like we're making progress. So for Chiron, maybe I can just briefly figure that out if I click through some months here. Okay, it looks like it was roughly 212 of Aries, or maybe 224, 2 something of Aries that it went retrograde. And let's see, oh boy, it's going to be a while before it gets there again. Just a second. Okay, well, as of March 29th, 2019, it will be at 214 of Aries. So basically, I would say roughly April of 2019 will be when we all collectively begin to feel like we're making progress in the area of the healing of our wounds, if I'm interpreting this correctly. So interesting stuff there indeed. So I guess we can move on to the next section now. So also on December 9th, as I mentioned in the last stream, Mercury does trine Chiron as well as it goes direct. So that's very interesting. Mercury trining Chiron as it goes direct is like, again, I'm not going to get way back into this, but emphasizing the using of the mind to heal those unhealed wounds, using thought, intellect, communication, all of that stuff. Let's see, December 10th, we have Mercury septile Pluto and Mercury trine the North Node. So Mercury septile Pluto, that's basically fateful events involving the intellect and or communication, and Pluto stuff. So deep, dark, powerful stuff, the unconscious, the know, and such things, which could take on a greater relevance right after Chiron has gone direct. Taking a lot of sips of this right now because I need it. I need that energy. Now, December 11th, we have Mercury quincunx Uranus at 6:37 a.m. Eastern Time. And so that could be like nervous tension, like trying to like get to some kind of mental breakthrough, but it's frustrating, it's difficult to get it to work out or to figure it out. You know, Mercury, communication, intellect, and a frustrating aspect with Uranus, sudden shocking developments, and other sorts of revelations, I guess. On December 12th, Mercury returns to Sagittarius. And so at this point, our thoughts are going to turn into the much more optimistic, idealistic, positive thinking, belief that we can do it energy that is Sagittarius. So let me see if I can talk some more about that here. Well, as Mercury re-enters Sagittarius on December 12th, it's still in this trine with Chiron and the North Node, interestingly enough. And so there could still be this energy of like using the mind to heal wounds, and maybe even having it have some connection with life purpose or something like that with the North Node. But now it's turning from the deep and dark, all or nothing passion of Scorpio to the hopeful, optimistic, idealistic vibe of Sagittarius. And so we're taking that energy and we're shifting it in the area that involves Mercury, thoughts, intellect, communication. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out for us all collectively. December 12th as Mercury re-enters Sagittarius. Now I'm going to pull up an additional chart of that because I want to see if there's anything else to consider in that area. Let's see, where did it go? Where the hell did it go? There it is. Okay, Mercury. Well, what's also interesting about this is that we can no longer call this a grand water trine because Mercury's moved into a fire sign. So I'm not even sure or I'm not even sure if there is a technical name for this or an official name for this. Would this be a grand water fire trine? Is that what it is? Because we've got two objects in water signs and one in a fire sign now, and that is of course Mercury. So we got the deep emotion of the water energy, and we've got the action-oriented willpower stuff of the fire energy. So that's interesting to consider. Now, it looks like technically at this time, Mercury will be in a square with the moon that day on December 12th. The moon at 23:38 of Aquarius. And so as that night proceeds, here, I'm going to do this in a different window to make life easier. Yes, as that night proceeds, the moon will get closer and closer to an exact square with Mercury, but that won't actually happen until the following day, literally just after 8:37 a.m. And right after, of course, the moon has entered Pisces. So while the moon is still in Aquarius that day, that Mercury enters Sagittarius, that energy could be quite helpful because we have that intellectual detachment of Aquarius. And so like if we're, wanting to work with the healing of wounds or whatever with the Chiron aspect, then moon in Aquarius is useful for that. But once the moon shifts into Pisces and perfectly squares Mercury perfectly squares Mercury soon after it does, at about 8:38, 8:39 a.m., December 13th, then the vibe goes from that intellectual detachment to nebulous, watery, emotional, mystical energy of Pisces. And so we're no longer all intellectually detached. Instead, now we're deep into the emotional and subjective side of things. And since it's a square to Mercury, well, it is a challenging aspect. It's like when in Aquarius, it can maybe be worked out somewhat, even though it's a square. But in Pisces, it's going to be more difficult energy simply because what we would be looking for in this scenario and what Mercury is certainly looking for is that intellectual detachment. Well, now it has the moon in Pisces telling it, you're not going to get your intellectual detachment so easily. I don't care how idealistic and optimistic you're feeling now that you've just stepped into the realms of hopeful Sagittarius. That's that to the best of my understanding would be the moon's message to Mercury there. So it's going to be an interesting couple of days, I suppose, as Mercury re-enters Sagittarius. So what else? What's next? Let us see. Oh, I see we're blurry, speaking of Neptunian things. What's next is, well, on December 13th at 9 p.m., Mercury does also form a bisextile to Neptune. So fateful events involving Mercury, the intellect, communication, all the stuff it's got going on, and Neptune, the spiritual realms, the mystical, non-physical realms, the dreams and visions and things of that nature. So fateful events involving the intellect working with that. So not quite sure what that will entail. Don't expect necessarily anything too major, because Mercury, Venus, and Mars are going to be much more of our day-to-day life things, and the moon is really our day-to-day life things. And the moon is more like our hour-to-hour things. But still, might as well mention it, I guess. I need a Kleenex. I've really got to start doing these live streams earlier, don't I? Find a way to make sure that I can be up earlier, because that's when people show up. There's literally no one here right now, but that's okay. So moving on. December 14th, the Sun forms a biquintile to the North Node. Creative events involving our life purpose, and Venus quintiles Pluto. And that's at 11:06 a.m. So creative aspect with Pluto, the sort of deep, dark, again, all or nothing realms. Nothing too huge, at least as far as I can tell, so we'll just move on. December 15th, Uranus half squares Neptune perfectly. This is interesting. This is something that, of course, has been building for some time and doesn't just affect the month of December, has probably been affecting us for weeks, if not months already. But, well, we have the planet of sudden shocking developments, Uranus, in a conflict with the planet of spiritual, mystical, nebulous, subjective things, Neptune, nebulous Neptune. So that, there's a number of possibilities. I'm going to try to figure out how I should determine this, or how I should delineate this. Let's see here. I guess there's the risk for deception and delusion. There can be tension, there can be uncertainty of potentially everything, that Uranus nervous tension being, obfuscated by the fog of Neptune. Let's see. Just taking a closer look at it here. I don't know, because it has long-lasting implications, so I don't want to make it sound like this is just about December 15th, but just December in general. There may be this tension beneath the surface involving Uranus with its unpredictability and Neptune with its trying to hide things and cloud things over. So I mean, I could almost see it like sudden shocking things that develop that we don't even know what they are. It's like it can be bad enough when Uranian energy manifests negatively or in an unwanted way, but with Neptune being square to it, it's like we don't even know what is happening. We don't even know what is going on, and that creates even more tension. So even though this perfects on December 15th, and so that may be a very interesting day, Uranus and Neptune are so slow moving that this is literally affecting the entire month of December, but it's kind of going on in the background, basically speaking. So just something to keep in mind, I suppose. Let's see. December 16th, Sun half square Venus, 9:07 a.m. Venus sextile Saturn, 9:26 a.m. So Sun half square Venus is the ego in conflict with our desires and getting what we want. So, you know, that could be a day where we're trying to get what we want, but we know that we should be doing something else, or we need to do something else, or we have to do something else. However, since Venus itself sextiles Saturn literally less than 20 minutes later at 9:26 a.m., that is more of an approval and liking of order and structure and adhering to what we should be doing. Now, it might even manifest as actually getting what we want easily, like getting almost a free pass or something, or not a, no, we should never say free pass when Saturn is involved. That's not the right term. Passing the test of Saturn so that we are then able to get what we want on December 16th, even with the Sun's half square to Venus. So I sense that there may be a bit more of an untold story in that area, which maybe, I don't know, we could dive into another time. But I'll just say that for now. December 16th, with the Venus-Saturn sextile, it's like we're likely to get the approval for getting what we want, you know, for our desires and getting what we want to be in alignment with the order and structure and authority and limitations and stuff like that, Saturn. But there's still this tension, this conflict between getting what we want and our ego or conscious mind. So the challenge there is, of course, to resolve that. Let me see if there's anything else that can be said about that. Getting what we want that might make us uncomfortable or make others uncomfortable. Could make us quite emotional as well. Maybe like our emotions getting a little out of control or something like that. And maybe even being like forced to involve ourselves in situations that we don't really want to be a part of, but we have to be a part of. So that is the risk that day. But with Venus-Saturn sextile, there's also all that positive energy of being likely to get what we want, getting approval. So it's weird how they're both sort of pulling at each other, it seems. And Neptune has struck again with the blurriness. There we go. December 17th, Mars sextile Pluto, Mercury biquintile Uranus, Mercury half square Pluto. What should we talk about here? Well, we should definitely, apparently, Simony Simons of Epica just started a live stream on Instagram. I won't get to see it though. Oh well. Doing my own live stream right now. I wish I had as many viewers as she did. That would be cool. But anyway, whatever. Epica, great band, by the way. So Mars sextile Pluto. Let's talk about that. That's going to be the most important thing here on December 17th. And I am going to pull up that date in chart form as well, in case there's anything else really significant that we need to talk about, All right, doesn't really look like it. Perfects at 1:57 a.m. Eastern Time. And Mars sextiling Pluto is going to talk about a number of things, including the use of power, but in a harmonious way, taking action in a harmonious way. You know, Mars, the planet of the masculine principle, assertion, aggression, action, harmonizing with Pluto, the planet of the deep, dark, unconscious realms, the things that we fear, all or nothing intensity, and biology as well. So things like that. What else can be said about this? Well, the idea of taking action to transform things, taking action to change things a lot, is a very powerful angle of that. There's also the idea of sexual energy, because both Mars and Pluto are going to talk about that, and that manifesting in a very harmonious way, since it is a sextile. So a good day for sexual energy, basically. So you can interpret that in whatever way you will. What else can we say about this? The idea of purification. The idea of having a lot of physical energy, especially with that Mars being physical energy, although then even Pluto talking about the sort of biology of things, you know, and the biological side of us humans. So we all might be feeling a sort of collective energy boost on and or around the 17th of December, more physical energy. So that's a very good thing. Let's see here. December 18th, Venus bisextile the North Node, fateful events involving our likes and dislikes and our life purpose. December 19th, Sun square Chiron, Mars quintile Saturn, and Sun quincunx North Node. All right, let's see here. Sun square Chiron, that's fairly significant. Oh boy, what can be said about this? Let me think here. This aspect reminds me of many things, because it is indeed the ego in conflict with Chiron, the part of us that heals wounds, the wounded healer. And what do we see a lot in today's world and culture? We see this idea of the ego not wanting to sort of do what is necessary in order to heal its wounds and the wounds of the overall like being that we are, you know. The ego not wanting to look at things, and indeed with this being a square, they're going up against each other. At this time, December 19th, that whole day basically, the ego is not going to want to look at its unhealed wounds. That is the challenge that day. The ego is going to want to look away or not deal with it, or I should say feel very distressed by unhealed wounds. And so what's the obvious answer that day? Don't resist looking at your unhealed wounds. Look right at them. Let the ego realize that it is in its best interest to look at the unhealed wounds that are its own, and the rest of that which you are. Let the ego realize that it's in its best interest to work with the healing of wounds and to look at them, to be present with them. So that's what you want to do that day. Let's see what else. December 20th, we have Mars bisextile Jupiter, Venus sesquisquare Chiron, and Sun trine Uranus. All right, the most important thing there is going to be the Sun trine to Uranus. That is going to be when things happen. That's a harmonious aspect. That's a smooth, energetic connection. That is something sudden and shocking that is happening or accomplished, but that is most likely very positive. Getting, how should I say this? The change we've been looking for on December 20th with this Sun-Uranus trine, the sudden, shocking, perhaps even change or developments that we have been wanting, that we've been looking for, that release of tension that Uranus talks about happens on or around December 20th. So that's something very good indeed to look forward to. And let us see if there's anything else to mention around that time. I see the moon lines up with the Uranus. Looks like early December 18th, speaking of all that sudden, shocking Uranian energy. Soon after 2 a.m., December 18th. So that might further the intensity of that in the very early hours of December 18th or in the very late hours of December 17th. There may be some sort of shocking developments. And it's hard to say if they will be wanted or unwanted. I think it's going to vary depending on people's individual lives. So, December 21st, we have Venus trine Neptune, Mercury conjunct Jupiter, and the Sun entering Capricorn. All right, so how should I get into this? The hell are we here? Let's see. Venus trine Neptune. Well, that can be very sweet and delicious. That's like a love of creativity and of the mystical realms and stuff like that. A great day for creativity. I don't know, what else can we pull up here? A great day for art, a great day for love, a great day for anything fantasy related, with Neptune being what it is. And I guess also a great day for desire, a great day maybe even for dreaming of what we want, dreaming Neptune of what we want, Venus. And then, let's see, with Mercury lining up with Jupiter that day as well at 12:36 p.m. Eastern Time, that is again going to magnify our communications, our mental activity. So expect a lot of mental activity on December 21st. A lot of mental activity and perhaps a lot of communication as well. And Mercury at that time will be at 9:34 of Sagittarius, along with Jupiter, obviously. And so Mercury is still not quite out of its retrograde shadow, but it is getting very close to 13 of Sagittarius. So we may feel with the influence of Jupiter like we're so close that we might as well be making mental progress, or we're making still some kind of mental progress with the powerful amplification of Jupiter, almost like being made so large that we are pushing through to progress regardless. Not exactly a breakthrough, but just being made so large that it can't help but sort of push through. And then at 5:22 p.m., the Sun enters Capricorn. And so we have the energy taking on a much more serious vibe, much more like reality-oriented vibe, tradition, working hard, stuff like that. Capricorn season begins, which includes Christmas, it includes New Year's Eve and New Year's, which are very Capricornian things indeed. This idea of completion and then starting anew, this idea of major life cycles and events and stuff like that. Any kind of major annual thing is like a Capricornian thing, you could say. Itchy nose again. So the sun goes from all the hope and inspiration of Sagittarius into the seriousness of Capricorn on December 21st. So even though Mercury aligns with Jupiter and our thoughts are all hopeful and optimistic and idealistic and full of inspiration and stuff like that, just later that day in the evening when the sun enters Capricorn, there's going to be a part of us that feels the seriousness of things again as well. So, both energies are still going on, though, is what I'm wanting to say. Both are still in effect. And I guess if you really want to get specific about it, you can say that the mind is likely to feel much more optimistic while the ego is getting much more serious about things. That's one way of looking at it anyway, one interpretation. I'm going to take just a moment to check my phone, give my voice a little rest. Okay, let's see. So, coming up next, on December 22nd, we have Mercury bisextile Mars, fateful events involving our mind and our taking of action, assertion, aggression. Shouldn't be anything too major, though, relatively speaking. December 23rd, Sun quintile Neptune, Chiron trine North Node, and Sun triseptile the North Node. Having two different aspects to the North Node that day may place an emphasis on our sense of life purpose or our individual life purposes. Sun quintiling Neptune, the ego working creatively with imagination. December 23rd might be quite the good day for working with the imagination. Let's see, December 24th, all aspects from Mercury. Mercury sesquisquare the North Node, sesquisquare Uranus, and square to Neptune. Well, this isn't like too major of things here, but let's go over it. Well, keep in mind also on December 24th, first of all, this is when Mercury gets out of its retrograde shadow. And so as Mercury is making these various aspects to these other objects, we are simultaneously feeling that we are making mental progress, that we're now really beginning to make mental progress after not having made it for so many weeks. And so to look at the individual aspects, Mercury sesquisquare the North Node. I'm not going to get too deep into that, but it's basically a challenging aspect between our mind and our sense of purpose. Mercury sesquisquare Uranus. Challenges between our mind and that which is nervous within us or tense within us, maybe sudden shocking events that are uncomfortable to our mind, making us nervous or feel tense, things like that. Then Mercury square Neptune is the intellect in conflict with the imagination. And so you want to try to bring those together, or the mind or words that are confused by the nebulousness of Neptune. So there's a danger that our communications on December 24th ironic because it's right as we're getting out of the Mercury retrograde shadow, do become confused. But fortunately, it's only really for that day. After that day, like, starting with December 25th, that energy begins dissipating, I guess, probably fairly rapidly. But yeah, there's that, and even just mental confusion could be a challenge that day. So, apply your mental activity creatively that day, because Neptune likes, or Neptune's energy works well, harmonizes well with creativity, with the imagination. Use your intellect imaginatively that day. Maybe there are things that can't be put into words, but there are things like poetry, for example, that attempts to express the imagination through words. And so, not a good time for logical thinking, a much better time for dreaming and imagining. And, again, using the intellect and mind creatively. On December 25th, we have Mercury biseptile Chiron, fateful events involving our mind/intellect and the healing of wounds. So that's Christmas Day, and that's the only aspect for Christmas Day. But let's take a bit of a closer look here. See, we accidentally skipped over the full moon. That's the tricky thing when doing this in this way. Full moon is in Cancer on December 22nd, just before 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's with the sun at 050 of Capricorn and the moon at 050 of Cancer, so not even 1 degree of Cancer. Well, Cancer is about the home and protection and security, our needs and wants, about very personal things, very emotional things. And so expect on December 22nd this significant emphasis with this full moon to be about those things: our needs, our wants, our emotional worlds, like the inner world, the private world, desires, perhaps even self-protection, security, safety, all of these kinds of things. It's a very emotional full moon, a deeply emotional full moon. Let me just backtrack here a bit. And the only other major aspect going on that day, of course, is Mercury biseptiling Mars, fateful events involving our intellect and our taking of action. So those might be connected in some way to the deep emotional vibe of the full moon. So moving on, let us see here. Now on December 26th, there are no significant aspects, basically. The moon will go from Leo to Virgo that day. We could talk about the sort of day-to-day things, but we're not really interested in that here. On December 27th, we have Venus septiling Saturn. So again, not exactly a major thing, but basically speaking then, fateful events involving our likes and dislikes and authority, order, and structure limitation. So that could be interesting. Maybe some fateful events involving one's love life. That doesn't mean negative, people. It does not mean negative. It just means fateful. So something fairly significant in those areas, more likely to manifest on December 27th. December 28th, we have Mars trine the North Node and Venus sextile Pluto. So I think Venus sextile Pluto would be the most significant thing there. That is our likes and dislikes, all that we find delicious and sweet. Venus harmonizing with our all or nothing stuff, deep, dark stuff, even Pluto stuff. So I'm trying to think of a good example of that. A highly passionate relationship could see some action that day. Having a love of dark things, perhaps, basically speaking, because we are talking about Pluto here. Let me see if we can talk about anything else. See what this says here. With the idea of trust, that sort of immersion. It's almost like we're back to, well, actually, Venus is still in Scorpio at this time, so we're already our love and relationship life is already in that sort of deep, passionate, all or nothing Scorpio energy. And then Venus is harmonizing with Pluto, which rules Scorpio. And so we're seeing an intensification of that kind of energy that's already been going on December 28th as Venus sextiles Pluto. And just intense interactions in general. There could be also an emphasis perhaps of like survival needs, I guess, with the Pluto aspect there. So see what else we have here. On December 29th, Mars lines up with Chiron at 12:40 a.m. Eastern Time. That is interesting. And right as that is happening, I see the moon will oppose Mars conjunct Chiron, but that's going to be a little bit before. Let's just try to figure out approximately when that is. Okay, actually it's more of a December 28th thing, roughly around the middle of the day. The moon at the end of Virgo will be opposite Mars, nearly perfectly conjunct Chiron. So we're talking the potential for a lot of emotional tension around this time. This is much more a December 28th thing because the moon will move on by then, or by the following day. But we are talking tension between our emotions and our unhealed wounds. So I would see this as like emotional resistance to wanting to embrace the healing of our unhealed wounds, and also emotional resistance to wanting to take action to help heal our unhealed wounds with that Mars Chiron conjunction. So let's get into that here in the early hours of December 29th. December 29th at 12:40 a.m. Mars conjunct Chiron. Does this want to give me any information? Doesn't look like it. Well, I'm going to give you my interpretation, then we're going to look up an interpretation so we can get thorough about it. Well, Mars is assertion, aggression, action. Chiron is our unhealed wounds. This could be a time when it's time to finally act to heal those wounds. Now, in what way, that's difficult to say, especially since they're both in Pisces. But there's a strong emphasis being placed in that direction, maybe the urge to act to heal wounds. And we are going to look up some information on that. Mars conjuncts Chiron. See if we can pull out any other tidbit of info about that. Let's see here. Mars conjunct Chiron, bring your gifts to the world. This is from astrobutterfly.com. All right, let's just read this and see what we've got here. Mars is conjunct Chiron, giving us a full quote-unquote taste of the Chiron medicine. We cannot understand Chiron without Saturn. Saturn represents the teacher that looks after us and keeps us from harm, making sure we are going to survive in a harsh world. But Saturn also represents our boundaries, our quote-unquote material human limitations. Saturn is the last planet visible with the naked eye. Everything beyond him is quote-unquote invisible. Starting with Uranus, we enter a less tangible and more abstract zone that affects less the individual and more generations of individuals. And here it comes Chiron. What makes Chiron so special Chiron symbol is the key for a reason, is that he is in orbit between Saturn and Uranus, between what is to be seen and what is not to be seen. It's our quote-unquote gifts. Chiron is also a symbol of the wounded healer, and his role is to prepare us for the journey to the unknown. Chiron is pain because we need pain to experience the higher vibration of consciousness. That's a weird sort of interpretation, but whatever. I'm not going to critique it at this time. But I'm going to check on some things briefly. I see that part 1 of this has posted to my channel by now, which is good. And we experienced technical difficulties and got cut off, but here we are now with part 2. I'm sorry, you guys, but I need a tissue. Okay, let's take a deeper look here. The square series of Chiron and Saturn will prepare us to undertake the initiatic journey of the soul. The way Mars will bring to the surface Chironic themes is by brutally exposing our pain. There it is, ladies and gentlemen, there it is. The way Mars will bring to the surface Chironic themes is by brutally exposing our pain. Well, isn't that interesting? Because indeed, Mars is assertion and aggression. I'm like misspeaking here. Mars wants to push forward and fight to make it happen and accomplish things. And so lining up with Chiron on December 29th, 12:40 a.m., that makes sense indeed, that there's going to be this pushing forward for exposing the things that bring us pain so that we can do something about them. December 29th should be a very interesting day. But also like the night of December 28th, the early hours of December 29th, since this is 12:40 a.m. we're talking about. But yeah, I think that really says it all. The way Mars will bring to the surface Chironic themes is by brutally exposing our pain. And then it goes on to say, Mars with Chiron are associated with shame because Chiron exposes our very first pain, the pain of our existence. Mars stands for assertivity. Is that even a word? I always say assertiveness, but whatever. Stands for assertivity, for our desire to put ourselves out there. With Chiron, we will find that our ability to assert ourselves, to be ourselves, is obstructed. We are ashamed of who we are. We are ashamed to act and, quote unquote, get out there, and we feel unable to defend ourselves. The deeper significance of this dynamic is the difficulty to separate ourselves from the outside world. And when we don't know where the limit sits, the outcome is either a drive to set these necessary boundaries by, quote unquote, being aggressive, or a tendency to see the other as the enemy, the intruder, the boundary setter. Isn't that interesting? How can we know what is our place in this world when we don't know where we stand? We ultimately, wait, what is this site saying? There are typos here. I think it's supposed to say, our ultimate fear of Mars conjunct Chiron is that by only being ourselves, we will hurt others. It does not help that in Pisces, Mars becomes even less assertive. This is true. And in his lower manifestations, he can become ambivalent and passive-aggressive. But Pisces is also the sign of compassion. And the transit of Mars, this part is in bold, And the transit of Mars and Chiron in Pisces is a gift, an opportunity to exercise and release that inner aggression we all have. Isn't that interesting? The transit of Mars and Chiron in Pisces is a gift, an opportunity to exercise and release that inner aggression we all have. Fascinating. The key to healing is learning to turn the anger, the shame, and the pain of being a mortal human into strength and compassion. The message is understanding that there is nothing to be ashamed of. The theme of assertion becomes even more apparent if we think Chiron is also known as the Maverick. Chiron travels between Saturn, authority rules, and Uranus, the rebel, the revolutionary. And just like the Maverick, Chiron follows his own course. And now we come closer to a deeper truth. In his higher manifestation, Chiron does not stand for hurt, bully, and shame. Chiron is a half-horse, half-human, force of nature that has transcended his human limitations and has brought the gifts of the nature to the gods. I think that's supposed to say the gifts of nature to the gods. Chiron is the sacred warrior. That's in bold. But to reach these higher realms of Chiron, Mars conjunct Chiron will challenge us to heal the aggressive side of our nature. We need to learn now how to assert ourselves in a healthy way and stand our ground. By expressing our inner aggression effectively and being firm but gracious, we can become teachers and mentors for other people dealing with the same issues. Healing our aggression comes hand in hand with learning how to cultivate bravery. Because Chiron exposes Mars' vulnerability, the tendency to cowardice, to punish ourselves for not trying harder, is very strong now. Although painful, these difficulties can make our patterns of behavior more conscious and will ultimately lead to acceptance and healing. In its highest expression, Mars Chiron stands for energy and spirit coming together with a strong drive to take action and leave something behind for those who will follow. I think that's very interesting, and I think that makes a lot of sense with the Mars-Chiron conjunction that does occur in the very early hours of December 29th. So let us keep all of that in mind. I also think it's appropriate to point out here, as we're talking about Mars-Chiron and Mars with its aggression, that we often associate aggression with negative things. We often see aggression with a negative connotation. We often associate it with violence and things like that. But what I'm wanting to point out here is that aggression in its purest form is not that. Aggression in its purest form is not negative. Aggression simply represents the creative thrust that we naturally initiate when wanting to make something happen or express ourselves or whatever. It's like the positive side of Mars. So indeed, this idea of like healing the aggressive side of our nature when Mars lines up with Chiron, it's like, well, let us also remember that there is such a thing as healthy aggression. There very much is. And that's the kind of aggression that we want to be interested in. So, yeah, I think that's a very good look at Mars conjunct Chiron. Now we're going to move on to December 30th. Mercury biquintile the North Node. Not a very significant aspect, but basically a creative connection between our minds and our life purpose that day. And then the end of the year, December 31st at 9:19 p.m., Mars enters Aries. So more Mars stuff here. Let's see, what can be said about this? Well, we've already gone over the Mars and Pisces stuff. Mars and Pisces having this potential to be confused and not knowing where it's going, not knowing where to direct its energy. But as Mars moves into Aries, its home sign, that's going to represent a significant shift in the energy. And let's see, where should we begin here? Well, of course, Mars in Aries is going to be its natural self. It's going to be its impulsive, aggressive, action-oriented, spontaneous, perhaps even war-like or like confrontation-seeking in a more negative aspect self. And so that's what the collective energy is going to take on much more on New Year's Eve, in fact. On New Year's Eve, Mars moves into Aries, and it's going to be a very energetic, a very energetic indeed New Year's Eve, as I believe Rick Levine called it. But we also at this time, I'm looking at 10 p.m. New Year's Eve, just rounding it to 10 p.m. We have the Sun at 10:23 of Capricorn and Saturn at 11:23 of Capricorn. That Sun-Saturn conjunction is extremely close to perfecting, and so that's placing an emphasis on following the rules, on adhering to tradition and stuff like that. And so it's like it's going to be an energetic and yet traditional New Year's Eve. And yes, again, I'm getting that from master astrologer Rick Levine, whose forecast I happened to watch earlier, since it came out today, which I did not plan all of this, but that's how it happened, unfortunately, I guess, for me. But yeah, so that should be very interesting, that sort of dynamic on New Year's Eve. Like, energetic, maybe a little intense and crazy, but still very much traditional and stability with Saturn. So that is, I guess, what I hope is a fairly thorough look at December of 2018. Now, if anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the chat. Let's see, I guess if we really wanted to, we could even go back over these aspects and just dig even still deeper into things. I don't know if we should here. I've been streaming for quite a while. Let's see. If I have any like final remarks. Well, the month of December and the year itself ends with the moon in Scorpio. So if you're wanting to know more what New Year's Eve will be like, it's going to have that deep Scorpio intensity and passion to it as well. So that should be interesting. The moon will be in a trine with Neptune that night. And so it's going to amplify the realms of the imagination and stuff like that. Let's see what else. I wonder if this says anything about Mars and Aries that I could deliver to this video, or the stream, I mean. Well, in a negative sense, Mars and Aries might make us a little more prone to accidents and stuff like that because the impulsivity is so strong. So be a little careful, I would say, on New Year's Eve. I guess it's always good advice or whatever. If you're traveling, getting together with people, whatever. Other than that, that's the month. There you have it. There you have it. If I were to point out what I think are the most significant events, the Sun square to Saturn on the Sun square to Mars on December 2nd is fairly significant. The ego in conflict with our aggressive instincts. The Sun square to Neptune on December 5th. The ego in conflict with our imagination, also fairly significant. So use that energy creatively that day, I would say. Mercury going direct on the 6th, getting out of its retrograde shadow on the 24th. We finally feel like we're making progress in the mental realm on the 24th. Chiron going direct on the 9th, I guess somewhat significant at least. Same going down my list here. Mars sextile Pluto on the 17th, lots of physical energy, lots of power, the use of power in constructive and productive, harmonious ways. Sun trine to Uranus on the 20th. The changes we have been looking for happening on or around that date, December 20th. Of course, we have the full moon in Cancer. That was on December 22nd. So the deep emotional, self-protecting security of the Cancerian energy being emphasized at that time. And let's see, Venus sextile Pluto, that can be interesting, you know, our likes and that which we find sweet and delicious harmonizing with that all or nothing, intense, passionate Pluto energy, and also the, you know, the deep, dark, unconscious stuff. The Mars-Chiron conjunction, which we've been over enough already. And then Mars entering Aries at the very end of the month, very end of the year, 9:19 p.m. Eastern Time, December 31st, taking the energy from the compassionate Pisces to the impulsiveness and spontaneity and hot-headedness of Aries. So that is my summary of the month, my thorough as possible, I guess, look at the month of December. Are there any questions or comments out there? If not, then I think I'm going to wrap things up. Actually, what I'm going to do, so I'm going to take a little break, give anyone out there time to watch some, or I mean, give anyone out there time to ask any comments or ask any questions or comments. Mercury's retrograde, I can't talk right now. And I'll be right back. Okay, I've returned. We're blurry. I'm going to fix that. All right, no questions or comments. All right, so I'm going to wrap the stream up then. I will be back on Saturday as usual with my tarot stream. We will be looking at the Hierophant card this time. That's sure to be very interesting. And then, of course, Monday night as usual, another stream analyzing more of Seth Speaks. We've gotten through the first 5 chapters, I believe, and so we'll be going to chapter 6. Which now my perfectionistic side is going to make me double check that. Yes, we'll be starting with chapter 6 on Monday night. And then Wednesday, a week from tonight, I guess, I'll be back with yet another stream, which I think I know what I'm doing for it, but I'm not sure yet, so I'm not going to announce it. And of course, all of these are, as usual, as long as I'm able to make the streams as long as there isn't anything that unexpected that happens that interferes with them. You know, do my very best to stay on schedule and do these streams. See, I feel like there was something else I was going to mention. Just that it's kind of funny that with the astrology on December 24th, I'm going to be doing at least I plan to anyway, one of those streams analyzing Seth Speaks, and that is when we are about to have the Mercury-Neptune square. Does it perfect that day? Hang on, I forget. Yes, it does. The Mercury-Neptune square, and so there's like the risk for confusion, people not understanding what other people are saying and stuff like that. And so I'm thinking, like, isn't that interesting? I hope that the Seth material that I get into that night doesn't get too out there, too nebulous for people to understand. But well, you know, that's why I'm here. Maybe it'll actually work to my advantage and to everyone's advantage, because the Seth material is largely about all of this metaphysical and non-physical and spiritual realm type stuff that Neptune talks about. So, and then Mercury, of course, is communication. What am I doing? I'm reading it and analyzing it. And so that would theoretically harmonize the energies of Mercury and Neptune. So all I'm saying is it'll be an interesting night, you know, December 24th, like right after that square perfects. I'm going to be reading from Seth Speaks and analyzing that live on stream, or maybe even during it if I'm up early enough, I guess. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that energy affects things. Also because for me personally, Mercury will be right over my Mars point in Sagittarius at that time. And so that's just going to energize my intellect even more. And not to mention that's also when Mercury gets out of its retrograde shadow. So all kinds of things happening on December 24th. It'll be interesting to see how it affects my stream that night is what I'm saying. So those are my upcoming plans for live streaming. Hopefully I can get my sleep schedule adjusted to earlier so I get more viewers during these, because late at night I hardly get any. Earlier I do usually get more, so I'll try to do that. No promises though. And let me think if there's anything else coming up. Nope, I don't think so. Just it's kind of interesting that the first tarot card that we'll be analyzing after the year ends is card 10, the Wheel of Fortune, which talks about this idea of the completion of a cycle and the beginning of a new cycle, and just cycles in general, and destiny and stuff like that. And like, I couldn't think of a more appropriate card for the beginning of the new year. And then the last one we'll talk about this year on December 29th will be the Hermit card, which can in some ways, with it being a 9, talk about endings, though it of course gets into so many other things. But anyway, all right, well, I want to thank everyone who was here in the stream earlier. There weren't very many people, or like in the previous stream, I mean, and as well as this stream. The stream hasn't had many viewers at all, but that's the way it goes, I guess. Sometimes it's fine, it's whatever. I'm just here to have fun. The stream from earlier at least had, you know, a couple more. And just, you know, thank you guys for watching. And this, as always, will be saved to my channel after, as part 1 is if you want to go back and watch any of it at all, any or all of it at all, I should say. So hope people have a great night, and I am going to be signing off now. See you guys next time.